Okay, it's a few minutes after 10, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This meeting is to provide some additional information on the Building Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities in South Carolina pilot project that Clemson University and South Carolina State University are implementing. And with specific information on the forestry program that Clemson is organizing. So most of you have already filled out the interest form, but if you have not, that's something that we'll discuss a little bit later, so we can gather your information. But for now, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Flynn. I am the implementation coordinator for the project. So I'm working, directly with some of the farmers and landowners to help them get enrolled and get access to the information they need so that we can get this project started this year. Also on the meeting today is some other members of our coordination team. And also Dr. Carrie Buck, who is the project manager of the Climate Smart Grown in SC project. And then Dr. Patrick Heisel, who is the lead on the forestry implementation team. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Buck to get us started. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. We are going to leave plenty of time at the end of the meeting. We're going to do a short presentation, and then we'll have lots of time for question and answer. So please either make a note of them or stick them in the chat, and we'll try to get to all your questions. And then after the meeting, I will send out a recording of this meeting, along with a link to a forestry program questionnaire where we're gathering a little bit of additional information. I also put the link to that questionnaire in the chat box. If while we're on today, you want to go ahead and fill that out, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Buck.
Hey everyone, how's my sound today? Is it all right?
Keep talking, Carrie. You were a little broken up there for a second.
I'm going to change my microphone. How's that one?
That sounds better.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Carrie Buck. I'm the project manager for Building Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities in South Carolina. That is the full name of this project. The short name is Climate Smart Grown in SC. And so I'm going to go over a little bit about the project, just an overview, and then pass it back over to Kelly to get into more details about the different practices and how you can participate in that process. So next slide, please.
Carrie, I think you should try advancing the slides. You might be able to do it yourself. If not, I'm happy to go ahead and do that for you.
I don't think so, because okay. I think it's showing on yours.
Okay. Yeah? All right. All good.
I just have this little intro, so then I'll go back to you. So this is a collaboration of the two land-grant universities in South Carolina. So we're working with SC State, and it's funded by the USDA. It's a 5-year pilot project, $70 million. It's a big grant program through the USDA. So there are lots of projects around the country with different universities and other organizations and corporations. So for our project, we do have 27 partner organizations in the state. These are industry, community organizations. And as part of this grant program with the USDA, we will be actively engaging underserved producers and landowners. So the project's goal is to increase the acreage and number of farms using climate smart practices, and that includes forest lands also in the state of South Carolina. And for this pilot project, we're focusing on 4 commodities: peanuts, leafy greens, forages for beef cattle, and forestry. All right, next slide. So there are 3 different components of our project. So this first part is implementation, and that is where you all will be involved. We'll provide training and technical support and financial incentives to our producers and our forest landowners. The goal over the 5 years is to enroll 500 farms at least. So this is working farms producers who will be working with SC State for the 3 ag commodities. And then for forest, that one is just going to be in Clemson. So that is the part that we're in, where we're getting the interest forms. You all are letting us know a little bit about you and about your forest land and what you might be interested in doing. And then as we start to enroll the different participants, then we'll start to do the training and technical support. Everyone who enrolls in the forest component will work closely with Extension and our researchers to sort out what practices will work best for your forest. And then we have a measurement component. So this is when the researchers for forest, it will just be Clemson researchers, but for our ag commodities, we have SC State and Clemson researchers. That's faculty, postdocs, graduate students, technicians, Extension, who will work with you or work with all the participants to come out and measure how these different practices affect greenhouse gas emissions, the soil, the forest. And then we have a market development component, working with our economists and other market specialists at both universities to develop and expand the markets for climate smart commodities. So looking at the economic benefits at the producer and forest landowner level to the regional economic impact. They'll be doing surveys with producers and landowners, but also with consumers and industry, looking at climate smart labeling and traceability to see if you implement these practices and you have a commodity as their value added, can you sell that for more? Is there a market for it? All right, next slide. So a little more about the measurement component. So the researchers will be collecting a lot of data at farms and the forest lands. And so some of it is very focused on the soil profiles and greenhouse gas emissions. And then also looking at forest ecosystem carbon fluxes, and then some of the ecological aspects of forests and climate smart practices, looking at pollinator diversity, bird diversity, and pests and pathogens. And then a little more about the market development component. So the surveys with the landowners and the producers will look at barriers and motivations for adopting or implementing these climate smart practices, the profitability, any marketing opportunities, and then looking at consumers. Are they willing to pay more? And then the industry, how will that actually work with the supply chain for these products? And looking at forest products traceability. We're going to look at some different options for certification and labeling, like you might see in organic or something like that, where we have a very specific label that is associated with certain practices that is specific for climate smart grown in South Carolina. And then looking at the regional economic impacts and some outreach materials, working with our market specialists. And then I will hand it back over to Kelly to really get into the implementation component of the project.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, I'm gonna hide my thing here. Whoops. Okay, so as Dr. Buck mentioned, we have multiple commodities that we're working with. So in the forestry program, we are the program is divided up into 4 implementation areas, and those areas are designed to achieve a variety of goals throughout the forest products system. So or the forestry system rather. Each of those, within each of those implementation areas, we have incentives that will be paying landowners or forestry specialists to do in order to achieve the goals of the project. So the way this project is set up is that we work with the landowner, we provide technical support and incentive payments in order to implement these practices that achieve these climate smart goals, which, you know, amongst other things can include increasing carbon storage, improving water quality on land. There's also a portion for regeneration of longleaf pine forests. So there's a lot of components there. There's a lot of background that's driving the purpose of this project. But in general, I'm going to give you an overview of the 4 different implementation areas. I'm going to talk about the incentives and the practices, and then how to get involved. So the 4 areas include a forest products program, which is providing incentives to loggers, timber buyers, or consulting foresters. And those incentives are mostly designed to coordinate clusters of smaller parcels of land that might not be desirable for those loggers or timber buyers in as a standalone parcel of land, but once we can cluster them together, perhaps get some of those smaller, less well-managed pieces of land improved and into possibly a profitable system. The next area is an afforestation program, which is converting agricultural land or pasture land into back into forest land. There's an opportunities for folks with unmanaged forest land, and these terms are a little bit loose, but essentially these are areas that folks who have access, who have land that they might not have been doing much with, but have some good stands of trees still, but might need some improvement. That's the forest improvement portion of the project. And then there's a maintenance portion for mostly for forested areas that are merchantable or have been managed and are ready for harvest. So Dr. Buck mentioned this, but I do want to repeat that the eligibility and incentive practices for each of these areas will be determined by the coordination team in conjunction with the landowner on what their specific goals for the land are. So we have a lot of targets we need to meet on our side as far as implementing the project, and we will try to work with as many participants as possible in order to achieve those goals and to allow some broad participation across the state. So here is this is a lot of information, and again, this I'll be sending a recording out, and also I can provide this information in a PDF form if anybody is interested in that. So don't feel the need to retain all of this. I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're actually doing with this program. Where is the money going and how is it being spent? So under each of those implementation areas that I just mentioned, there are different opportunities, and those include any combination of these practices that you see listed here. So for instance, I'm going to just go through these practices briefly. You can see the associated incentives for each of them. But thinning would be something that we would work with landowners to do if that's something that's necessary on the property. Prolonged rotation would be for folks who have land that is ready to be clear cut and replanted, and that the idea, the impetus for prolonged rotation is that you leave those trees in a forest system for several additional years and sequester additional carbon before harvesting. Selected harvest would be in certain scenarios where you would go into a forested area and create openings, like openings within the forest to either encourage habitat for wildlife or create opportunities for planting new trees. Tree and shrub establishment, that's planting new trees, is an opportunity under all of the areas. However, in the afforestation program, the incentive is a bit higher for that to account for the foregone revenue off of the use of that agricultural land. So in the afforestation program, you're converting agricultural land or pasture land into back into forest. And so that incentive accounts for the planting of the trees and also the foregone revenue. Planting trees in the improvement and maintenance program is also a possibility. We are working with higher quality seedlings, anything other than open pollinated. And of course, we have technical support to help landowners, identify the best species for, their individual parcels of land. And in the maintenance for the tree planting in a mature forest that are ready to be harvested, if there's underplanting that's happening, those parcels will only be underplanted with longleaf pine. We're working with the Longleaf Alliance, and part of one of the initiatives of the Climate Smart program is to reestablish longleaf stands in the state. So complementary practices to some of those practices that I just mentioned, and these are only available in conjunction with one of the incentivized practices, include site preparation, which might be a mechanical clearing or chemical site preparation, prescribed burning, or like an herbaceous weed treatment. And all of those are, like, as I mentioned, are only options in conjunction with some of the other practices I mentioned. And then the final piece, the final practices include these incentives for the loggers and timber buyers or forest consultants. And those two incentives include an incentive to the actual loggers for mobilizing equipment in areas where they might not necessarily find it cost effective to be. So giving them another like an opportunity to generate, or an incentive rather, to bring equipment to an area where they might not normally bring their equipment. And then the coordination of those smaller parcels, those clusters of forested land, is also being incentivized. So that would be for timber buyers or forest consultants. So in order to be able to participate in the program, the first requirement is that none of the land that is enrolled in the Climate Smart program can be enrolled in any other cost share program, such as an NRCS program, for the same practices. We are only enrolling parcels of land from 20 acres up to a maximum of 100 acres. And the afforestation and improvement pieces are for existing forests. I'm sorry, the improvement piece is for existing forest So we're planting forests, improving forests, or prolonging the harvest of forests. So clear-cut parcels are not eligible for this program. And because of the complex nature of the program, we will likely be doing site evaluations for all of the potential participants. Properties that are going to be included will represent these the focus areas that I mentioned: the afforestation, forest improvement, and maintenance. To give you an idea of the scope of the project, over the 5-year life of the project, we anticipate working with about 8,500 acres of forest land, and that loosely translates to between 50 and 150 participants or sites. And there is a large amount of interest in this program. So if the number of sites that interested in enrolling in the Climate Smart program exceeds our funding caps, then we will do a randomized selection of eligible participants. So the next steps after a participant is enrolled. So once we go through that initial evaluation, decide and identify the actual participants in the program, the landowner will be expected to work closely with the extension program and the coordination or the implementation team in order to implement the practices. We will be providing training that will be a requirement as participation in the program. All participants will be enrolled in the vendor system in order to receive your incentive payments. So that's something that we have an incentive coordinator, Tammy Morton, who will be handling that. Surveys are part of the research side, and so all participants will be expected to complete all surveys, and then coordinate with the field technicians in order for them to be able to collect soil samples or implement other types of research on your property. And then, of course, you need to implement the practice before you will be able to receive an incentive payment. And those practices, once they're verified, then the process to receive a payment would be initiated.